privilege to be here. Little quick background, which you don't need, but I think it's relevant. I started in IT 18 years ago, did it for about 3 years, got really stressed out, so I needed a sabbatical. So I took a 5-year sabbatical, joined the Marines, and fixed missile guidance systems and laser for them, and then came back into data center. Great break. So in 2005, got back into data center, and the reason I say that is because in the last 10 years, I've been back in data center. Today is the first slice of time where I'm having the same conversations I had in 97, 98, 99 in data center IT. Those conversations were revolved around what can I do with technology to drive your business? And the conversations I've been having for the last 10 years since I got back in is how can I drop your costs on what you're doing in a static fashion? We're actually trying to do something with IT today to be more agile, to get our businesses past the next, and I think it's a very different slice in time over the last few years. And I think that was touched on in almost every session, which is the reason I'm focusing on. Agility, speed will either win or they'll get us killed and have us be the next company that's out of business rather than the next company that's taken over. So with that, kicking here a little bit, the thing that's driving all of that change and all of that speed is really the application. And it's not just the application, it's the user demands on the application. The phone in your pocket has changed your expectations of what an application should be, how fast you should get it, and when you should get it. That's made everything change for user expectations that we deliver to our customers and to our internal employees. Don't forget them. So looking at this, what's changing here is how we deliver this. We deliver this anytime, anywhere. All of this is status quo. I'm boring you. So what I'm here to talk about is not just the application, because I don't believe the application matters at all. And just to offend the storage people in the room, I also don't believe the data matters at all. The reason is, until you combine the two and create information, it's both useless. If you give me an archive file of my Microsoft Outlook and you don't give me the Outlook app, the data's no good. If I log into Facebook and my wall or whatever, I don't use Facebook, so I don't know, but whatever is supposed to be there isn't there because the data's not there, but the app's working just fine, again, it's useless. It's the information that's created by data and application merging that matters. And that's why this is called information technology. So we need to focus there. My focus, my drive now, is how do I get that to you? How do I get the information to you, both the data and the application? So we did a poll. We did a poll within our customers about all of these changes going on and asked them what was the biggest concern for how they deliver this. And 78% of them told us the network was broken. Absolutely could not do what they needed it to do what they needed to do. I think that was enough needed to do's. So 78% of them told us that the network was most critical. It's an interesting number to us. We liked it. Because we're a networking company at heart, if 78% of our customers hadn't told us the network was important, we'd have just picked a different control group and kept asking the question until we got the right number for a slide. It's marketing. So we take that and we take a step forward and we look at what's actually happening. And I'm a big fan as a technologist of not selling you widgets. I want to find a business problem and know that business problem, know what you're trying to do, and then figure out what widget matters. So looking at the widgets that matter, or looking at the business problems up top, the first thing we found is that the network is not responsive to change. Who here would feel that their network moves fast enough to support what they do? Nobody in the room? VMs come up in minutes, storage is typically pre-pooled. Might not even have to touch the storage, and then we wait on the network for weeks, right? This is all manual change on a command line. It's like Fred Flintstone under the car, it's broken. There's no automation in the network. That's the technical problem there. We've never built it in. You kept buying my switches with no automation, so I kept selling them to you with no automation. Now we're at a place where we can't do that. We need automation within the way that works. Next problem is security is kind of important, I'm hearing today. So security and services, when delivered on a network, are probably the biggest nightmare in anyone's brain. Security and services are impossible to tie into how we deliver what we do to get the application, the data, into information for our users. The reason is it's different teams, it's different silos, it's then again command line configuration of very archaic devices. So we need a way to start integrating that into the way we deploy new applications very rapidly. And to do that, we need to be able to stitch what we're delivering to those devices, firewalls, load balancers, the like, into the way we provision the application and the network with it. And then finally, SLAs are really, really hard to meet. Anyone have just all day long, SLA is easy to do? All my sad rhetorical questions. They're typically really hard. And one of the problems is not that it's technology, it's people. There's no mapping of what an application is to what the network is configured to do. There's no direct mapping between applications and network. If you look at a help desk call, I can't email, okay? So the help desk, in 100% of cases, does one thing first. They call the network and tell them it's broken, okay? So the network has to then troubleshoot. Now, how does a network troubleshoot email? They have to figure out on spreadsheets or something like spreadsheets what VLANs and subnets and things like this all actually equate back to that application, and then find out how to go troubleshoot those. They don't know what an application is on the network. So we need to provide a better direct mapping between this. So with those in mind, I'm going to briefly touch on this slide because I didn't build this slide. I find it funny. If you build slides for a Western audience, the top left is the predominant thing. You put the thing on that side that is the most important. And for the last years of my career, OpEx, TCO would have been on the far left of most of the slides I'd have to use. Here it's automation, because that's completely lacking in the network. Next, we have investment protection, because we can't get rid of that. Then we have open, which is very new in networking. The idea of open source, brand new. And security and visibility, so on and so forth. Then we look a little deeper, because the infrastructure delivers our applications, it delivers our information, it delivers our data. The infrastructure actually matters. Even if it's cloud, it's still infrastructure. Does anyone remember Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle, jumping up and down on a couch like a madman, screaming, "The cloud is just computers, the cloud is just servers"? He's right. It is still the same thing. So when we look underneath, what's happening there? We're all talking about virtualization and microservices and all of that. 75% of servers today deployed are running bare metal applications. And that number should not track with you, and you should really despise me for saying that. It doesn't make any sense. Because everyone will also tell you that 70–80% of applications are virtualized. Now you have to do a little math. And I'm a Marine, so I keep my math at addition. When you do the math, 70–80% of applications are virtualized at 25 or 30 to 1 on 25% of the physical servers. The rest are running bare metal. They could be running modern applications, big data applications, legacy applications, but they're running bare metal. So we focus on being able to support bare metal and virtualization and containers. We have to do this uniformly when we look at networking. Then we look at what's driving all the change with how many VMs we put on a server and the complexity that comes with that, or the microservices and all that. And that's that Intel and AMD are still building chips applicable to Moore's Law. Every 6 months to a year, they're going to give you a better chip with more processing capacity. And you're going to have to be able to drive that processing capacity and get that information in and out of that server. Then we look at things like, what are you actually doing with your data and your applications, and where are you putting them? Anyone remember arguments from probably 6 or 7 years ago where it was everything's going to be public cloud or everything's going to be private cloud? Anyone see these? A lot of them on Twitter, a lot of them in bars in Silicon Valley. Today, it's both. Everything's going to be both. If you look at any organization, you can find a use case for I'm going to put something in the public cloud, I'm going to put something in another public cloud, and I'm going to keep some things internal in my own infrastructure. You take Web 3.0 companies like Uber. You know what Uber's doing with their resources right now? Pulling them out of the public cloud, putting them back in the private cloud. Why? Saves them money. They hit a scale where it's lower cost, right? You look at Zynga. Zynga builds games primarily for Facebook. They're well known for Farmville. When Zynga builds a game, they don't know if it's going to fail or not. So they build it in public cloud. It's elastic. They can figure it out. If it's successful, they measure it, build the infrastructure required to run it, bring it back. So there's reasons to use both, and we have to build a way to connect all these things together uniformly. And then finally, we have to look at modern applications. Because I'm an engineer in a marketing team, I have to put at least one buzzword on every slide. I just chose big data for this one. It's not really what I'm talking about. Big data is one application that's causing explosive IP growth. When you look at IP growth measured today, 25% aggregated year-over-year growth of IP data on your data center network. That's insane. How do you keep up with that? So those are the things we looked at when we looked at what we were building. Then we looked at networking requirements a little deeper. We looked at how do you actually deliver and what do we need to deliver to get that information to your users. So this slide is very near and dear to my heart, so take a quick, close look at it. After building this slide, I can no longer, with a straight face, call myself an engineer, because no engineer would build that slide with a pyramid and the buzzword like app agility at the top. The reason I built it is because that's what I have to give you. There are two reasons that I have to make delivery of information faster. One is the one that we forget about quite a bit. If you cannot deliver to your users, the people that work for the same company, an application they require fast enough, they'll find somebody who does. And then you have no governance, no compliance, no control over your own data. And they don't care about the corporate policy that says don't do it. I came into Cisco via an acquisition. It was a startup. We were in stealth mode. Nobody knew what we were building. And all of our patented data, all of our data was sitting on my laptop in Dropbox, spread across the cloud, and not even on storage Dropbox owns, because they use Amazon S3. Because I had no other way to do my job without it. They couldn't answer fast enough. So remember your internal users when you talk about the agility of the application. And then, of course, our customers, right? Or our mission in the Fed space. To get there, we have to simplify the network. Anyone a networking professional? Or CCIE, even better. Anyone have a background in networking like that? Networking is the most complex thing I've ever worked with in technology, and as I said, I fixed missile guidance systems for the military. These are archaic missile guidance systems. So we need to simplify that down, otherwise we can't get app agility. Below that, we need to start looking at networks as a system. Today they're a bunch of boxes. We need to start looking at them as app delivery systems. And then underneath, we have to do the most important thing and build it from the ground up. Automation and programmability. Anyone ever deployed an automation system on infrastructure and watched it fail? Or had it work for a few weeks and then firmware changed on one box and it didn't work anymore? You want to know the reason? It wasn't built to be automated. It was built for a human to configure it in some way, shape, or form. So when you put an automation system above, automation system's a machine, it's an application. It's then talking to a human interface that's then programming a machine. You have an artificial translation layer that doesn't work. It's like me, I only speak English. If I was trying to talk to a guy who only spoke German, and there was a French guy who was trilingual translating for us, it's not gonna be a great conversation. And anytime a little bit of culture changes, it's gonna fall apart. So we need to build that in from the ground up. So we looked at this in a big picture way. How do we deliver your application and information wherever you need it based on the business policy around that application, big picture? If you looked at networking in a very simple fashion, a network's job is to take groups of objects, connect them to other groups of objects, and apply policy. So we said, how do we make the network do that? And you only have to describe what connects to what and what does my business need from a security, compliance, and governance perspective. And then we built the systems to make that happen. So now I think we have a question. In that realm, my product, depending on who you ask, is a software-defined networking product. That's what I talk about. So have you considered SDN? That no is staying very no. About what I expected. What was that? 4 answers on the no and 13 on the yes. So everyone's considered it. Most of you are considering it, but most of us aren't deploying it because we're kind of wondering where it sits, which is the right way to go, and what does it do for me. A lot of our hype technologies, when they hit that peak of the bubble, we want to talk about them, but we haven't really figured out what is it actually going to do under the covers. And so we're coming out of that on SDN now a little bit. When we look at another polling question, scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your understanding of software-defined networking? And if I get any 10s at the high end, I'm leaving. Oh, it's 7 to 10, I'm safe. And that's the other problem with new technologies. We have a trouble understanding them until we understand them, then how do we go deploy them? So when we look at that, there was some good knowledge there, but most of us were in the middle to the low. So one of the things that I think a lot of your speakers today talked about that is very, very important, it fell into the realm typically of a DevOps conversation. But when you look at DevOps, what I see as the heart of DevOps, it's not a piece of technology, it's not something someone could sell, it's breaking barriers between two traditionally siloed groups, the people who write, deploy, and own the application, the people who have to support it on the infrastructure. And the problem of doing that in infrastructure space is that there's two completely different languages. So when you look at this, an application team is going to talk about governance, security, compliance, geodependencies, risk, and then we might have to translate that into the network, which is VLANs and subnets and all these other things. And I don't know anything about their job, and they don't know anything about my job in most cases, so this becomes very difficult. It's actually the slowest point of application deployment, is how do I take what you need from an application into what I can deploy on the network? So what if we automated that? What if we built Google Translate for what the application needed from a delivery system that could translate it straight down into the infrastructure? And just like Google Translate, it's not going to get everything perfect. You still need the person that understands the application to look at it, and you still need the person that understands the infrastructure to look at it, but it's translating automatically as they're verifying what's going on. That's what we focused on for your applications. We focused on it in a kind of simple way. We like to rinse and repeat. So I work for a pretty amazing executive team. They've successfully built if you did back of the napkin math, 65% of the revenue Cisco generates today came from products they built from the ground up. I'm talking the hardware, the silicon, every little piece of it. So they stole something a few years ago. They stole this idea of how the carrier network looks at a phone. The beauty of your phone, especially on an Android, is if you break that phone, you can go to Verizon, you can go to whoever you choose, you can buy a new phone, you can move the SIM card over, and it's like it never happened. It's a stateless piece of hardware. It gets all of its intelligence, its connectivity, its identity from that SIM card. So why did your servers have all this stuff built into them that I typed in there that if that server went away, I'd have to go do again? So they built a system for servers that said, let me abstract that out, let me build a SIM card for servers. And then we said that worked really well. We built a SIM card for networks. So instead of configuring switches, we start looking at how do you architect your application. From an application's architect's perspective, we call it an application profile, I think pretty good name, and then we deploy it down. If your application goes away, all of that comes back out of the network, freeing up the resources, pulling it back up. It's a SIM card for the network. And then we said, what we need to be able to do for you is do this uniformly wherever you choose to run your applications and deliver your information. So how do we take your application and move it between two data centers and then move it up into public cloud resources? And when I talk about your application, I'm not talking about a container, and I'm not talking about a VM. I'm talking about all the containers and VMs that connect your application and the business policy, governance, security requirements around them, so they don't have to be pre-provisioned in one spot or the other. I'm just going to take that and move them with it. And we said, when we do that, how do we do that and also provide you visibility into how healthy that application is from an infrastructure perspective, right? And so that's what we built here. It's really an enablement technology for any type of cloud you would build the way I look at it. If you take what Google has built in their cloud and what Amazon has built in their cloud for their networks, we built it into a turnkey box so that you don't have to hire network scientists to do it for you. Next question. Do you have plans for agile infrastructure, OpenStack, private cloud, PaaS, et cetera? And in this crowd, I think I'm going to get a much different answer than I do in the typical crowds I'm talking to. I think I'd probably get the same answer if I said, are you using these things today here? But yes, so this is what we need to do. We've all been talking about agility today, the majority of you are. So looking a little bit at what we need to do with networking. The first thing is basic, and I'm a keep it simple, stupid type of person, mainly because I fit the bill. When we look at this, first thing we need to do is just give you automation. Give you automation that works in the network so that you don't have people moving from box to box making configurations. Then we need to do that tying in the security and services that work with that, automate that provisioning in, and then start looking at doing it based on the application for the applications you're building and writing today. So when you write that application or build it and you're architecting out how it looks and how it connects to this database and how it comes over and talks to this other component, that map is what I provision the entire network based on, the delivery system. And then looking at it in a way that we can group things in a more logical fashion. Today, the only way you can group things on your delivery system, your network, is network constructs, VLAN, subnets, things that most of us don't care about. Why not group them based on security zones? Why not be able to group them naturally on the delivery system based on development lifecycle? Move them through dev, test, and production by changing its group or the tag on that group even. Maybe even have your developers doing that through an API. And then finally being able to do that through maybe something like the tiers of the application. I have a web tier, an app tier, a database tier, it's a 3-tier app. Build those into groups naturally and have them deployed that way automatically. Then we look at more granular groups. Security is top of mind. So the idea of security, the big problem in security today is we typically run on a perimeter security model. Perimeter security model is broken. Perimeter security is like a building with badge access at the front door. If somebody badges you in and lets you go, now you can run rampant and do whatever you want. Right? We need to get away from that because somebody will find one vulnerability on one device and then use that to exploit everything else inside the perimeter. So we can look at security in a much more granular fashion as we deploy this, and again, do it naturally. What do you care about? How do you like to separate the food on your tray? PCI requirements, HIPAA requirements, internet, and intranet. And then looking a little deeper into security, embedding it into the network. One of the biggest problems with networking today is that it's what we would call a blacklist model. My chief scientist calls it a phone book that only contains the phone numbers you are not allowed to call. Pretty useless phone book. Network's job is to connect everything together, then you have to go try and close down what's not allowed to talk. Why don't we flip that on its head and say, until you tell me which groups are allowed to talk, they don't. And put that in, integrated with any vendor you want. Most interesting thing on here is half of those logos are competitors of my company. They're partners of this product set. And then embedding in things like PCI that matter. So just a quick case study, and I want this case study in here. This was actually done by the IDC, who was your first speaker today. This is a company that deployed this methodology from Cisco. This is called application-centric infrastructure. They deployed it solely based on the security requirements, compliance, whitelist model, threat-focused security detection, which I think is a very smart approach. Then they got a bonus. This company is Symantec. After deploying it, they went through a divestiture, which if you work in IT and you ever get told that you're about to go through a divestiture, you might as well just polish your resume. It's the most miserable experience you can do. But because they were on this system with the security built in and the tenancy built in for scale and cloud, they were able to just split it, maintain all the IP addressing, not make any changes to the application and the rest. So this case study goes through and talks about a little bit about what this does. And then I'm going to just briefly go through this. When you look at this, this is Cisco IT is doing the same thing with this product. I don't care about those four numbers on the right. Those are all cost savings. I personally don't care about those. What I care about is what the CIOs and CTOs I talk to on a weekly basis care about. 58% reduction in network provisioning time. That's almost 60% more agile. And oh, by the way, I save them money, is the way I look at that. So with all that said, I think that's probably more than enough. One more question. Which of the following, or actually I lied too, which of the following is your top IT concern? Speed, agility, uptime, information security, cost. Somebody yell out the answer you expect, because I think I already know it from this crowd. Security? I was thinking speed, agility. Wow, costs coming up, bring up the rear there. All right. I would not have gotten that answer 4 years ago in IT. Costs would have been far different in there. Speed and agility is what we need today. And this is almost always my closing slide. It's a beautiful quote to me in the IT world. If you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance less. And I think that was the theme of today. The most beautiful thing about this, General Shiznesky was an Army general, retired from the Army. Obama appointed him to the VA to run the Veterans Administration. His sole job in life was to change the VA and make it work for veterans. He failed to do it fast enough and became irrelevant. Makes that quote so much more beautiful to me. That's all I got.
Joe, I have to say, first of all, I thought that not only was it informative, but wasn't entertaining too. He had some good zingers in there. That was really good. So for our last speaker, can we get a couple questions from everybody? Let's see. We got a few questions out there. Put your hand up. It'll be easier for me to see. There's got to be something here for this gentleman. He's a leader in his field. All right, come over here.
So conceptually, can you just paint a high-level picture of what the configuration or deployment between marrying the app deployment strategy and the network, what will that look like in the application deployment lifecycle? So pick on a .NET shop, that the developers, DevOps works in Visual Studio and Team Foundation Server to deploy various applications and services. where will this tool come into the whole deployment lifecycle in configuring, the app to work with the network?
That depends on how far you want to take the keys and hand them to the developers. Two of my largest customers have taken, because it's all API driven on top, it ties the network together in a single API and exposes that way, have taken that and either used its API directly or built their own portal, and the developers deploy the network at the speed they deploy the applications based on the groupings that they need for the application they're using. Now, you can rein that back in and have the network team set up certain constructs that the developers can then use, or in some cases, we have people that are going to keep it straight in the networking team's hands, but they have a much faster automated way to deploy it for the developer.
What are your disaster recovery capabilities, meaning also considerations in a disaster recovery, a real disaster recovery where you can do swaps at any time and so on with this approach?
So there's a couple of ways to look at it. If you're talking of the kind of active distances up to 120 kilometers, I can stretch the fabric so anything you create on one side is always available to be used on the other side, so you can have full active disaster recovery. If you're going further than that, then everything I do is either XML or JSON when it comes out, the API, so it's all a file. I can take that, pre-provision it anywhere you want, have it sitting ready, and I prefer that idea, it's sitting ready. That way you don't have to have resources provisioned with it already provisioned sitting in them. You just have the logical file sitting there that when you have the DR, you snap it on, provisions down onto the network, your new apps come over.
Yeah, great presentation. Wanted to figure out how microsegmentation could apply to VDI instances specifically, potentially for security.
So within this product set?
Right.
So
Well,
within this
within-
product set, microsegmentation, it really depends on how you're looking at it. So the first answer is I'm not going to do microsegmentation within the hypervisor with my product today. So if it was a pointed question, I'll get the no out of the way. If it wasn't, the way we look at the grouping is at the switch level, everything is fine-tuned groups. No group can talk to the other. We can then integrate with third-party products. I mentioned quite a few of them up there. If you name a security vendor, we have integration with them to be able to provide that microsegmentation up into the hypervisor, or we also have a Cisco product that does it. But this does not on its own do it at the granular level of the VNIC in the VM.
All right, you can always see Joe out in the lobby. You were awesome. Thank you very much for coming out today. We appreciate it. Big hand.